To the subtle secrets of pranayama. This is my 30-day challenge today. We're on day 12, and it's taken this long to get to the conversation of belly breathing because I wanted to go through respiratory musculature. I wanted to go through interoceptive practices. I wanted to get into the experience of the breath in the face and the throat before I even started talking about belly breathing. Now, when I was first studying yoga, I think this is like in the late 70s. I can't really say studying because I was in 6th grade, but my 6th grade social studies teacher led a yoga group. That was my first experience with yoga. And at that time, I remember the conversation was you breathe into your belly. And I've heard this throughout the past, more than 30 years that I've been practicing, and I've been exposed and studying the teachings. Many teachers will say that's the place to start is with belly breathing. And so belly breathing has its place, it has its function, it has its benefits, and it's not the only way to breathe. And so that's why it took me 12 days to get here, and we have another 18 days to go in the challenge. So there's many other things to talk about besides belly breathing, but I wanted to make sure I covered this topic because it is an important topic. And you need to understand the mechanisms of it. You need to understand the application of belly breathing, and to also understand that it's not universal. It's not the only way to breathe, and it's not the best way to breathe for everybody all the time. It is like all breathing practices, like all pranayama, it has its application and its function, and that's what we're going to explore a little bit today. So I talked about the past couple of days, I've been talking about how when the breath comes in, because it's a gas, it's going to diffuse in the upper tissues of the lungs. And it's not like you can actually breathe into your belly. That's an important thing to recognize, that when you breathe into your lungs, there's a volume change, right? So that means that there has to be a shift that happens, like there's something has to expand in your lungs, in the chest cavity when you breathe. But when you breathe, nothing changes in your belly in terms of the volume. It shouldn't. If it does, that's that's a dysfunction. You have to go to the hospital because there's nothing that changes in the belly. Only the shape of the abdominal cavity changes, and the pressure in the abdominal cavity is mechanical. It's not from a shift in the volume. Does that make sense? So when I breathe into my chest, that's going to change the pressure. But when I breathe into my belly, it's going to happen mechanically. It's going to happen from the diaphragm pressing down into the abdominal organs. So belly breathing can be super useful in terms of, there's a couple of really important applications. One is, so the first thing I'm going to say is that it's a useful practice to do when you're still. So that could be sitting before you meditate. It could be potentially when you're reclining in a restorative pose. It could be when you lie down at night to fall asleep. But what's really interesting to understand is that belly breathing is something conscious that you do to create a shift in the parasympathetic activation of the nervous system. And then once the nervous system gets into parasympathetic activation, the belly breathing will automatically stop, and then chest breathing takes over. So when you're sleeping, you're not belly breathing. You're breathing into your chest, and that's almost everybody, except maybe babies. And people say, well, babies breathe into the belly, so that's the way we should breathe. But babies have different developmental needs than adults do, right? Just like Patabi Joyce created Ashtanga yoga for skinny teenage boys to help them stand in attention and put their feet together and go into mountain pose because that helped them focus. That's a different need than the need of a 50-year-old woman, right? That doesn't necessarily need to do a practice like that to create attention in her mind. Rather, I think a lot of women in that category, 40s, 50s, 60s, need to do practices that help to calm the nervous system as those perimenopausal and menopausal changes happen in the nervous system, to be able to shift and calm the nervous system, not necessarily to focus on attention. And this is a similar application when we're thinking about something like belly breathing. Belly breathing is really useful for calming the nervous system to help you get to sleep, but you shouldn't be doing it while you're sleeping because that's a different state of the body and the nervous system. And I hope this is making sense. Feel free, as I always say, to leave comments and questions, and I get to them as much as I can. Okay, so so with belly breathing, yes, it makes a lot, and I'm not going to get to 3-part breath. Hopefully we'll get to that in the next video. But with belly breathing, yeah, it does make sense to use your hands and to breathe deep into the abdomen. So you can do this while I'm talking if you like. So letting the belly extend as you inhale. But don't just think about the belly. Also think about the side waist and the back, the lower back, all of that releasing as you inhale. And the exhale can be really natural. It can be really just sort of a release, but nothing particular we're doing with the exhale. We'll get to that in future videos too. Pretty much we've only been focusing on the inhale until now. So letting the hands can be really helpful because that creates more proprioceptive and more interoceptive awareness, which is wonderful for bringing the front brain into the conversation of the breath. We'll do a few more. You can. I'm going to talk just a little bit more as you're breathing into the belly. So belly breathing, useful for seated, useful for reclining, useful to help you sleep. Not so good for asanas. We'll get to that too. Not so useful for asanas. Maybe in between asanas, pausing and noticing it's good at those times. Now, one of the things I'd like you to observe as you're doing this belly breathing is the softness of the tertiary muscles. So the scalenes and the SCM, these muscles in your neck, letting those be soft, and they don't have to engage, and the very, very small amounts of engagement when you're doing this. And this is why this breath is so beneficial for anxiety, so useful for people with anxiety. Of course, it depends on what's going on. It might not be good for panic attacks. I'm not saying that, but it can be helpful for people to change their nervous system if they're a little bit more conscious of feeling the abdominal muscles move on the inhale and letting the neck and shoulders soften. That's the key, I think. I think that's the reason why belly breathing is effective for anxiety, particularly, for helping you fall asleep, particularly, for helping to change the nervous system when you feel revved up, particularly. Every pranayama has its own specific application. Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up for today. I want to say, again, leave comments and questions. And the other thing I'd like to ask you to do is, if you're not on my mailing list, please send me an email, info@subtleyoga.com or subtleyoga@gmail.com. Send me an email and we'll put you on the mailing list, because I'm going to have more challenges coming up. I'm going to have more ebooks and online workshops coming up that I'd love you to join me for. Thank you for being here. I'm going to take tomorrow off because it's Sunday. See you Monday. Namaste.